Welcome back to Origami Snowman. My name is Matt. That was Gus. Why in the world would you ever, in any, intelligent world, take my advice or consider my opinion when it comes to books? I don't know. I don't know. Is nobody else talking to you about movies and books and stuff? I mean, is nobody else sharing their opinion with you? Is it just me? That's unfortunate. I mean, we all need a circle of people who we can bounce ideas off of. Anyway, why me? Well, I don't know, but let me set the stage a little bit. Maybe give you some insight into my upbringing, so that we can maybe find a connection point, and you can say, oh, interesting, he grew up the same way I did, or he grew up in the same place I did, or he is me, because I'm like the only one watching these videos. So if some of these points sound familiar, things, personal interests, personal upbringing, that kind of stuff. If that sounds familiar to you, then maybe we'll have some things in common, and you can actually give my opinion a little bit of weight. You can maybe believe me when I say that a book is hot garbage. I am an old man by internet standards. I was born while Star Wars, the original Star Wars, was still in movie theaters. I'm older than Google. I took typing class on an electric typewriter. The Oregon Trail memes. I lived it. Not the original Oregon Trail, not the one where people actually died, but the one that we played in the media center at my elementary school on the Apple IIe computers, and I never could figure out what the point of that was. I grew up in the 80s. I'm very much a product of the 80s. However, here's a weird little thing. I didn't get to watch a whole lot of movies from the 80s when they were new. You know what I mean, Gus? Like when the movies were coming out, my family was pretty conservative. We were not allowed to, not only were we not allowed to curse in our home, which that's normal. Most families are polite like that. But I couldn't say darn or butt or fart. These were not allowable. I remember one time my mom finding a recipe in a magazine, and she said, "Oh, this sounds good. It's called dump cake." And I, in the next room, laughed. And she said, "What's funny? Why is that funny?" And my sister had to explain to her why her little brother laughed at dump cake. I got in trouble for that. We didn't watch a lot of movies. Star Wars was a thing. You can't go wrong with the future. They were thinking, if college doesn't work out, at least he'll understand something about computers, I guess, right? Bye, Gus. Tron, the original Tron, first movie I ever saw in the theaters. Still think it's pretty good. Indiana Jones, we watched stuff like that. Usually when we'd go to somebody else's house for dinner and they had good movies on VHS or Betamax. That was a thing back then. Stuff like Ghostbusters, that came out the year I was in kindergarten. I didn't see that until I was an adult. Same thing with Goonies. I didn't see Goonies until I was an adult. Can I help you? You are awfully whiny back there. Did Bill do something to you? Is he bothering you? Are you eating wall art? He's eating our wall art. There were a lot of movies that I didn't see. I remember a movie called Time Bandits. Time Bandits was a Terry Gilliam movie. And my friend Nate loved that movie, and he was all about it. He was like, "That movie's so good, you gotta watch it." So I took it home from the video store where I worked, which best job if you can get your hands on it. You'll need a time machine first. But I took home Time Bandits. They had a time machine. And I watched it and wasn't impressed. It just didn't do anything for me. And I realized some movies, you have to see them in their intended setting. So I needed to see Time Bandits back in the 80s when I was a kid. It was made for 80s kids. It wasn't made for, 19 or 18-year-old Matt in the 90s. That wasn't when it was meant to be seen. So there were a lot of movies that I just went ahead and skipped because I kind of knew that it wasn't really the time or the place. It wasn't really until the 90s that I started to amass a collection of my own interests, like movies and books and things like that, that people weren't getting for me, they weren't like providing me. It was stuff that I was finding on my own, like at garage sales, or, you know, you'd go to the video store and they'd have a bunch of movies that they were just selling because they needed to, you know, cycle like their stock, you know, like an old used copy or whatever. And so there were a handful of movies that I bought for myself that became just like my ride or die movies, movies that I kind of came to on my own terms, and to this day just blow my mind. Three of them, real quick, three movies that I still think are fantastic, just absolutely fantastic movies that were very much products of the 90s and therefore just I idolized. The Fisher King, Terry Gilliam, The Fisher King. That's Jeff Bridges and Robin Williams. It is amazing. Definitely not the kind of movie your 12-year-old should be watching, but I watched it and I loved it. It blew my mind. It's still absolutely heart-wrenching, very emotional, very charged kind of movie where, oh, it's just great. It's great. Check that one out. Benny and June, oddly enough, I could probably quote that movie. If it's on, I can't just let it happen. I have to participate. It's one of those movies. There's a scene at the end, and if you've seen it, you know the scene I'm talking about. Chills every single time. Every time it happens, it just... So that is another great one that I don't think has ever fallen away. And another one from the 90s that I think is absolutely incredible, and I'm only saying these things, by the way, just as a reminder so that you know where I'm coming from. So when I reference a book or a movie that is good or isn't good, you know maybe what my other interests are, so you can kind of compare and you can lay a foundation, right? So this other movie, So I Married an Axe Murderer. Mike Myers, Nancy Travis. This was before Wayne's World. This was before Austin Powers. Mike Myers was just kind of trying to be a funny actor, and he really was. This is, I think, one of the best. Now, I think it's a rom-com. I have recently been told that it is not. They didn't think it was either very rom or very com. I don't know. I didn't get confirmation on that. But it is, So I Married an Axe Murderer. I'm not going to tell you too much about it. It's so funny. It's so funny. It's so quotable. Oh my goodness. Those are the kinds of movies that I grew up watching. You know, like Hook. Hook was another one. Oh my goodness. Hook was amazing. You know, all these formative movies that most people found their formative media like in like the early parts of their life. I was about 10 years behind. So, I got a slow start. I'm a bit of a late bloomer. I'm hoping eventually I'll bloom. Same thing with music. The music that I love now, I didn't come to until I was older. I was 18, 19. Some of it I just recently discovered, but a lot of punk rock. I love punk rock. You know, Bad Religion, Rancid is my favorite. The Ramones, oh my goodness. So many amazing bands that I just didn't have access to growing up in Midwest America, you know, my tiny little town of Grable, Indiana. In fact, my book, Secretly Kings, deals an awful lot with growing up in a small Indiana town. And my character, Oliver Barrow, he's obsessed with sci-fi and fantasy novels and punk rock. Those are his big things. So a lot of what you would read in that book, a lot of Oliver's interests are in fact my interests, just stuff that I didn't come to until much later. He got cool way earlier than I did. Again, late bloomer. It's coming. It's around the corner. The music that I listened to back in the 90s, it was just the same stuff that everybody listened to because I didn't have access to good music. I didn't know that. I listened to the radio. I listened to the top 40. I would go to church. Our church was right across the street from our house. I would go to church and I would leave the radio on with a cassette recording so I could hear what the top 10 songs were that week. How else would you know what your favorite music is? Stuff like Boyz II Men, PM Dawn. You guys remember PM Dawn? I don't remember really any of these bands, like what they played. It was just, that was on the radio. Now, I will say this. If you and I are in the car and Paula Abdul comes on, I'm going to sing. Sorry, it's just what's going to happen. It's not because I want to. It's because I was hypnotized all through the 90s. It's all stuck in my brain. The 90s were an interesting time. You'd be singing Paula Abdul, and then all of a sudden Green Day would come on, and you'd be like, what's happening? And then all of a sudden Blind Melon comes around the corner and smacks you, and you're like, is this the best song ever written? I don't know. It might be. The 90s were crazy. We got Weezer. We got Beck. We got Limp Bizkit. I mean, there was a lot of crazy stuff. Smashing Pumpkins were all around. It was an interesting time, and it was a weird time to have to pick sides. You know what I mean? But thank goodness punk rock came along and come on, Matt. Yeah, join us. And then it throttled me, and thank goodness, because I was weird. Not anymore, though. If you grew up in the Midwest in the 90s, 80s and 90s, and you love punk rock, and you love sci-fi and fantasy, and you love Fisher King and Benny and June, and So I Married an Axe Murderer, and if you love Roald Dahl and J.R. Tolkien and Brandon Sanderson and Stephen King and Kurt Vonnegut, this might be your opinion right here. I might be able to speak to some things that you absolutely love. I should tell you, I was definitely a Star Wars kid, not a Star Trek kid. I'm not a believer in the two camps idea. I don't think that you have to choose one or the other. There's room for both of those, you guys. But I just never made room for Star Trek. It wasn't my thing. J.J. Abrams did a controversial thing that I actually really loved. He took Star Trek and he made it feel like Star Wars, which I know a lot of people had a problem with, but I did not. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, you might want to give my opinion a little bit of weight. But if you're like, I like Nicholas Sparks and Danielle Steele and I love country music, then you're probably not going to be on board with much of what I have to say. So you can check in every now and then and see what I think about things, but for the most part, I don't think I'm going to say nice things about the things that you like, because the things that you like are garbage. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I love you all to pieces, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.